Toledo is currently in the process of renaming the airport after Gene Kranz, the Toledo native who is most famously mission commander for Apollo 13, which is called the successful failure by NASA. Ashley Bastock from the Toledo Blade joins us now, and Jim Harbaugh, also Toledo native. Well, Michigan's trip to Penn State, a successful failure. They did not win the game, so it was a failure, but boy, is there a lot to work off of that looked pretty good for the Wolverines, particularly in the second half.
Man, last week with the sandwiches, this week with space, you're really coming with it with these analogies. But yeah, I agree. That's definitely the definition of a successful failure, given the fact that Michigan looked so good offensively in the second half. I think a lot of people would agree that this was maybe the best game Shea Patterson has played this year. He kind of proved that Illinois game wasn't a fluke, really carried on that production from the week before. Zach Charbonnet made some big runs on the ground. Granted, there were 5 dropped passes from receivers in the first half, and then, of course, the drop pass by Ronnie Bell there at the end. But granted, those guys made some big plays, especially Ronnie Bell and Nico Collins. So, and the offensive line was clicking maybe the best that they've clicked all year. So all in all, in the second half, it was a great game. It just took too long to get going. Michigan got gashed for some big plays early on. We're down 21-0. They got gashed for a big touchdown when they were coming back in the second half for a 53-yarder from Hamler. So all in all, those plays kind of added up. Penn State was just more efficient when they got those big looks, but Michigan's offense looked maybe the best we've seen it looked, and that's why this loss is so unfortunate.
And I think the thing that really stings Michigan fans is, once again, the Wolverines get off to that slow start, the 21-0 hole. Don Brown's defense did not look prepared in the first half.
Yeah, it looked like they maybe missed some key parts of the scouting report, and there were some serious issues. The biggest issues that I saw were leaving safeties like Brad Hawkins and Josh Metellus alone on Hamler because he's so fast. This guy has a 4.28 40 time. The fastest time in the NFL Combine last year was 4.29. So he's basically a freak athlete. I think maybe the only Michigan safety that could keep up with him is Dax Hill, and even then I don't know, because you're talking about putting a true freshman on one of the top receivers in the conference. That for me was the biggest issue, because you looked at his numbers and how efficient he was, and there are all these stats, like Michigan ran more plays, they had the ball longer, they won all of these offensive stats, they had more total yards. But Penn State, I think, as I said earlier, when it comes down to it, they were just more efficient, and the Michigan defense got hurt early, and it's kind of what we saw against Wisconsin. It's the same thing. The biggest difference was they kind of bounced back and showed some signs of life despite a huge deficit.
Going back to Shea Patterson on Monday, Jim Harbaugh praising Patterson, calling him a courageous play at quarterback for Shea Patterson.
Yeah, he said heroic too. He said he thinks that's a fair comparison. And I think, when you're down by that much and you are the one in charge and this offense hasn't worked, and this offense hasn't worked for the fans, the media, you're getting all of this criticism. For him to come out and play the way he did and show, I can do it against teams that aren't just Illinois. Now, granted, maybe we shouldn't be saying that anymore considering Illinois' win over Wisconsin, but this was definitely a big game for him to have, and I think they need that. And Shea Patterson did all he can do, and he ran well on the ground. He did good in his reads. So I think all of that backs up what Jim Harbaugh was saying.
Second Big Ten loss for the Michigan Wolverines. The faint college football playoff hopes are out the window. Any chance really to get to Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game is pretty much out the window. So what's left to play for Michigan? Play spoiler. And they've got a chance to do that coming up on Saturday night with rival Notre Dame coming to town. And that's one of the things Coach Harbaugh talked about, was we're going to stay busy because we got a big one.
Exactly. And he said going forward that he got asked, I believe, what are your long-term goals for the season, given that basically your 2 big ones are no longer really attainable, and at the very least they might still be mathematically attainable, but they're out of Michigan's hands at this point. They would need Ohio State and Penn State to basically collapse. So he said we're just going out and trying to win our next game. That's the big goal, that they will look at it as if they can win their next game, then that is successful at this point, and that's what they're going to try to do against Notre Dame.
Fighting Irish coming off an off week. This is a one-loss Notre Dame team. They looked fantastic against Bowling Green, but who hasn't looked fantastic against Bowling Green? Well, Toledo didn't look fantastic against Bowling Green. But getting back to the Fighting Irish, they had the week off. They're coming off. The game before that was a close win over Southern California. They do have that loss at Georgia. So a Notre Dame team who looks very much to be the real deal when you're talking about top 10 teams. Maybe no longer in that top 5 category, but certainly a top 10 team.
Sure, and it'll be interesting to kind of see how they come out, if being in the big house on the road is a little bit intimidating, and especially coming off of a bye week. We saw that that's what happened to Michigan a little bit. Granted, there were some other problems, as in the defense got gashed in the run game. The offense wasn't clicking at all yet, but playing on the road after a bye week is tough, and especially in this environment where it is technically a rivalry game in a lot of ways. So I think that Michigan has to come out and play like they've got nothing to lose, because Notre Dame definitely has more to lose at this point.
For the foreseeable future, this is the last meeting between Michigan and Notre Dame, although if Jim Harbaugh has anything to say about it, he would like to see the series continue, which you can understand why. This is one of the premier rivalries in college football. You're talking about two of the winningest programs all time. It's a shame they don't meet every year. Hopefully we can get back to that.
That's basically what Jim Harbaugh said. He said he thinks there have been talks along those lines, and obviously these are two of the most watched programs in college football too. So if you're the TV networks, you would have to love that contract getting renewed as well. And as you said, and as we alluded to, this is kind of a rivalry. There's a ton of Notre Dame fans in Toledo. I'd say it's probably the third most rooted for college football team behind Ohio State and Michigan when it comes to your Division I programs here. So I think a lot of people would really like to see this rivalry renewed in the future.
Fighting Irish Ian Book, quarterback, he's got to be looking at this Michigan defense and have one of two thoughts. Either, oh my goodness, I'm in trouble, or if I can do what Sean Clifford did, we might be able to pick these guys apart.
Exactly, and I think, again, it all comes back to that efficiency. If he can find his receivers and kind of get some of those big plays, that's what Michigan has struggled with. And if you're a defense, you never want to hear that you can't defend big plays. But I think the Michigan defense as a whole has kind of settled down as far as stopping these runs up the middle. Their teams haven't been having as much success with that as Wisconsin did. So I think Notre Dame would have to go through it another way, and doing it through the air might be the best bet.
Transfer portal is a topic that is now just part of everyday life for college football, and Michigan has a second player now entering the transfer portal midseason.
Exactly. Jamarick Woods, a safety who Chris Partridge, the special teams and safeties coach earlier in the year, said he was working through something injury-wise. He played there the last 2 years on special teams and at safety. I believe he played in 12 games in 2017 and 11 last season. But with working through an injury, we've seen Dax Hill kind of emerge and get more time. And knowing how good Dax Hill is, he's the top recruit in that class, more time is probably going to be coming for him. So I think Jamarick Woods probably looked at this and said, where do I fall in this depth chart, and how realistic is it for me to get more time? So he will be entering the transfer portal. And of course, if you enter the transfer portal, you don't have to transfer, but he's played 4 games this year, which would qualify him for a red shirt by the new NCAA red shirt rules.
The other major topic for Michigan during this week has been the reaction to Ronnie Bell's drop. We saw some very nasty stuff on social media, which unfortunately is not a shocker. And it's kind of ironic that in October, which is National Anti-Bullying Month, you get this type of stuff going on. And Jim Harbaugh's rallied around Bell. His teammates have rallied around Bell. But it's unfortunate that they even have to address this. The kid dropped a pass. He didn't intend to do it. He felt horrible about it. Yet now they have to defend him.
Exactly, and it's really horrible to see some of the stuff that was directed at him. We know there was at least one person that reached out to him directly via email, and Ronnie Bell's dad shared that screenshot on social media. And his teammates said it's upsetting, and I believe Carlo Kemp said there's nobody that plays the way he does. Like, where's their attitude, their heart on their sleeve when they're playing? And it's really upsetting for these guys to see one of their teammates kind of taken down like this, because the reality of the situation is very rarely or ever is one play decisive in a football game. There were tons of other mistakes made. There were other drop passes. The defense got gashed for a ton of yards early. There was conservative play calling early. There's all these issues. And again, defensively, Michigan had a chance to get a stop there at the end and maybe get the offense another possession, and that didn't happen. But it's easy to kind of pile on the one kid because there's a drop in the end zone and it looks like it's the easiest thing. So Ronnie Bell hasn't talked yet, but his teammates have all defended him. He's definitely not short on that. Everyone from Shea Patterson to defensive guys like Carlo Kemp and Kwity Paye, and of course Jim Harbaugh.
You look at laying ahead for this Michigan schedule this season, and a lot of people are saying this is going to be a 4, if not a 5-loss team. What can they do to avoid that?
I think they have to come out and do what Jim Harbaugh talked about on Monday, and it's just concentrate week to week, because the reality is those big goals are gone now. And they can't come out saying, you know what, we have nothing left to play for at this point. Otherwise, they'll come out and get killed in at least 2 of their games that are left, maybe 3 or 4. So I think it's all about just moving on, picking up the pieces, and controlling what you can control. And maybe that doesn't mean you can control a Big Ten title anymore, but it means you can control your record and avoid what happened in 2017, where they lost their final 3 games after losing to Penn State.
All right, thank you very much, Ashley Bastock from the Toledo Blade. Of course, much more of this conversation available on the BCSN Now app.